Hello, disciples, wherever you may be in this first week of Advent 2020, an Advent that we've never seen before and one unlike any that we have seen before. I know that many of you are working really hard to make sure that your Advent worship and your devotional time and space and all the pageantry that goes along with this season is as fulfilling and inspirational as it can be. And we've heard from across the church that now that we've sort of settled in, we're beyond just trying to survive those early weeks of pandemic. And now we're really trying to leverage the technology and all of the creative gifts of so many people who assist with worship across our churches. And we thought it might be time for another conversation about what you can do to really leverage and improve upon the things that you're doing, how you can be creative with not a whole lot of technology, and how those of you might be able to connect with people who may have a little bit more expertise. We all know that we're not all the visually creative person. God has given us a multitude of gifts, and some of us have some gifts and some of us have others. And the important thing is to be able to connect with the gifts so that we can deliver the kind of worship experience that God's people are needing so much during this time. It's my hope and prayer, and that you'll not only learn something, but those of you who are more technically and creatively minded will want to join something that we're calling the Tech Core. I'm happy that Jeff Champeau from First Christian Church in Norman, Oklahoma, has been working with my office to produce. He was behind the scenes on all of the Love is an Action Word town halls that we did across the year. And one of our panelists, Suzanne Castle, was the assembly producer for General Assembly in Des Moines last year. I have an IT background. I'm not the creative person that these folks are, but it strikes me that there's so many who have these technical gifts who want to be able to serve our church. And so as we put together this Tech Core, you'll be hearing more from the Office of the General Minister and President about how you can sign up and let us know what your gifts are. And we want to try to give that group some formality and offer it as sort of a working a core of people who can be available to consult and help congregations and other ministries in our church. So thanks for being here. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to our host for the evening, Jeff Champeau. Again, an elder at First Christian Church in Norman, Oklahoma. Jeff's currently also a member of the General Board of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and is an entrepreneur and has his own network services consulting firm. So Jeff, thank you for pulling this group together and for hosting our conversation tonight. It is being recorded also, so we'll be able to post that somewhere on our website and other media. And later you'll have an opportunity to enter questions into the chat. So I'll turn it over to Jeff. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm really grateful and excited that we're having this event tonight.
Thanks, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to serve the church in this way. And yeah, this is one of the places I'm most comfortable where the church and technology intersect is a place I love to be. It's kind of two of my passions. So I'm thrilled to be here and just be part of the conversation. So tonight we've got some panelists, and I will introduce them now, and then we'll get on with the conversation. So first, Suzanne Castle. Reverend Dr. Suzanne Castle is an internationally acclaimed speaker, author, and artist. From the stage in Cats to You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, to the Nutcracker and the screen in Ghost Squadron and Rules of Engagement, Dr. Castle has always had a love for the merging of rituals and art. Her seminary training was with Claremont School of Theology, and her doctorate is in worship studies with a specialty in pop culture rituals. Her books include the award-winning Chalice Press publication Brim, Creative Overflow in Worship Design, with musician Andrew Moran, and recently you can read her essay in the Theology of Prince, published by Lexington Press. Suzanne loves bringing the extraordinary sparkle back into people's lives and helping them capture a vision full of joy and verve. She is currently a pastor and leadership strategist residing in Fort Worth, Texas. Thanks for joining us, Suzanne. We've also got Brandon Gilvin. Reverend Brandon Gilvin is a native of Mount Sterling, Kentucky, a graduate of Hiram College, a school with historic ties to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and of Vanderbilt Divinity School. Ordained since 2002, Brandon has served congregations in Kentucky, Kansas, and Missouri, ecumenical organizations based in Nairobi, Kenya, and Toronto, Canada, and has served with disaster response and sustainable development ministries to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and Church World Service. He has passions for community building, social justice work, and the intersection of culture and faith, as well as a love for reading, writing, live music, and the outdoors. Brandon and his wife, Dr. Lisa Hale, moved to Chattanooga in 2015 and are glad to call this bustling, growing community and church their homes. Thank you, Brandon. And Kurt Gwartney. Kurt is the Senior Director of Communications and Adjunct Instructor in the Center for Ministry and Lay Training at Phillips Theological Seminary. A 1999 alumnus of the seminary, Kurt has served in a variety of journalism and communications roles in his life. He started working in radio at the age of 16 at his hometown's radio station. He was the news director at public radio KGOU, Norman, Oklahoma City, before moving to Tulsa 5 years ago. He currently serves as president of the board for Family Promise of Tulsa County. He's a former member of the National Board of Governors of the Religion Communicators Council and Public Radio News Directors, Inc. He's the incoming chair for the Tulsa Regional Chamber's Business Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion organization, Mosaic. Kurt is a certified United Methodist communicator and often introduces himself at church as the preacher's wife. His spouse, the Reverend Charlotte Gwartney, is the senior pastor at Faith United Methodist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Welcome, Kurt. To kick things off, I will go in the order in which I introduced you, which is also alphabetical order for those keeping track at home. Speak for a few minutes on your experiences with technology and virtual forms of worship during this pandemic. Suzanne.
Well, through a wide variety of means and under the Brim brand, I've been producing worship services even the first week of the pandemic to allow pastors a chance to take a breath. And most of those were done as pre-produced events. We're going to be throwing out a lot of terms here today, meaning that information was recorded and then edited and then pushed out on certain platforms and forms of media. And the way that we have done most of those is through Zoom, just like this, and hitting the record button and allowing lyrics to pop in and out. And there are interesting ways to do that, from low tech to super high tech. As well as under the Brim Bram, we did a entire Advent series that is specific to worship at home or hybrid churches or churches that are meeting in sanctuary, that has all the graphics and video feeds, original music, everything that you might need to help pastors plug and play aspects of worship, including how to do Advent at home. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit further on in the night, including how do you do an Advent wreath when you're not in the sanctuary? So all these questions I think we've been structuring and dealing with. And I feel like part of maybe my magic is that I love when there's a problem, and I love when there's something new and different out there and people are like, oh, what do we do now? I'm like, oh, pick me, let me help you figure this out. And so what I've tried to do, because I serve a teeny tiny traditional church outside the Metroplex that is technology not savvy, and yet we have still found a way to connect our 90-year-olds that aren't coming to church with porch drop-off bags, as well as taking pictures of them, showing it in church. And we'll talk about all different ways to do that. And so I guess what I would say, as far as my experience in technology and virtual forms of worship, as someone who has produced a whole lot and been around the entertainment world since I was about 12, I would say we're all still learning too. And I don't want anyone that's on here tonight to get frustrated because there's information is coming at such a fast pace, and someone says this worked for me, and then you go try it, but it didn't work for you. And so I think one of the best ways that you can do is say, what do I need to do for my congregation? And my congregation is considered a rural congregation. What we have access to, we don't do IGTV, we don't have a fancy Twitter feed, we do have a Facebook page, and we have a website, and that's about it. And even walking through people in a way that allows them access to that and making doorways, I think has been one of the biggest learnings I've had, which is stepping back from what is easy for me and teaching it as a language. as a skill and saying, okay, if I was 90 and knew nothing, what do I need to know to do this? And so it really making sure that I am staying clear in my communication and in step-by-step process has helped me not be so frustrated, and hopefully those that are interacting with the technology not be as frustrated as well.
Thank you. Kurt, did you hear that? She started when she was 12. She's got you beat. All right. Brandon, tell us a little bit about your experiences with tech in this weird time.
Sure, absolutely. So First Christian Church Chattanooga is like a lot of downtown churches in mid-size cities, pretty familiar in terms of how a lot of disciples churches like us look. So we had a fairly long-standing practice of recording audio of our worship services. Once upon a time directly onto CDs, more recently on just kind of digital media, which would then be uploaded onto our website. And we had been experimenting with live streaming via Facebook. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we made some pretty quick decisions. We knew that there were a couple of folks on our tech team and a couple of other staff members who were high risk. And so we shifted pretty quickly from a first Sunday where we just kind of threw up an iPad and recorded the worship service. And for folks who didn't have computer access, we actually tried to use freeconferencecall.com and just have a cell phone to try to pick up the audio. And so people's expectations for tech were reflected pretty quickly, because we got, I can't hear, I can't see, all of that, very, very quick sort of response. So the next week we shifted to do a pre-recorded service with all of our staff in one room where the acoustics would not be the same as they were in our large sanctuary, in order to kind of produce a 30-minute version of what is usually about an hour-long service pre-recorded, all in one place. We began having some conversations about the risk of continuing to be together in that space. Again, we didn't have as much understanding yet of the coronavirus as a novel virus. That's how those sort of things go. And so we decided pretty quickly that we would, given kind of an incoming order to shelter at home, that we would do pre-recorded worship services, and we would record our bits and pieces from our homes. And our associate minister has a background in radio and film production. And so he had the skills to be able to kind of quickly produce everything that we sent him together into something a semblance of our already going traditional worship service. And so over the past months, we've kind of perfected that. For our context, I would say it has worked for us to have these pre-recorded worship services. Again, as we are in a state with very high infection rates, we have wanted to kind of honor everyone's safety at home. We've had some staff turnover in the middle of that, and actually interviewed a music director and hired him in part because he had expertise in doing digital production of music, so, which has been just a real gift. I have also found that kind of my biggest shift in learning curve is in how I think about producing sermons. And first few weeks I kind of wrote as I've always written, which took a certain amount of time. And somewhere right around Easter, I began to kind of think about how to produce a sermon for this new platform. So thinking about it as a script, almost mini documentary is kind of how I kind of think about them now. So there have been some not only technical shifts, but in terms of kind of conceptualizing what it is that we do has been key. The last thing that I'll mention is kind of along with the pre-recorded worship, we wanted to kind of have some sort of sense of live community on every Sunday. So we have created a Zoom Sunday school hour, which has been really, really life-giving for folks in a lot of ways. We've been able to get some of our regular teachers to do some interesting things. There's something that happens music-wise for about 25 to 30 minutes for kids every other week. And then between that and when worship drops, so to speak, we have about a half-hour coffee hour on Zoom between the Sunday school and worship. And that allows us to kind of talk about pastoral concerns that have come up when issues emerged around kind of our national reckoning on race this summer. That was a great opportunity for us to kind of talk. And because the worship service is pre-recorded, if there is some sort of kind of larger pastoral need that needs to be taken care of, we can stretch that coffee half hour into as long as it needs to take. And so those have been the ways that we've kind of used pretty low tech. Everybody films with their phone or their pad or whatever. And, we're able to produce it using, not super inexpensive, but using laptop computers and then uploading it, to YouTube and then posting that on Facebook. We're able to do something that's pretty low tech, but pretty helpful for our community.
Thanks, Brandon. That was helpful. Kurt, you're next, but first, if you just in the listening to what you've heard so far, for those of you watching, if you've come up with questions, or maybe you came with a few questions you wanted to ask, if you hit that Q&A button at the bottom and enter your questions into the Q&A, after Kurt gives us his insight, we will switch over and take some questions and let the panelists give their input based on the things you guys want to hear about. So Kurt, over to you.
Thanks, Jeff, and everybody else. Great work, everyone. My goodness, we've all traveled the same but different roads get through this pandemic. One thing I didn't put in my bio that I'm realizing I probably should have is right out of seminary, I was the director of communications for a large downtown United Methodist Church in Oklahoma City, St. Luke's, which had an hour and a half of television every week, on broadcast television. So I had that experience of actually producing, worship for TV for several years, which came to be very, very helpful in this time. So I am on the communications team at my spouse's church. And when the pandemic hit, we did the iPhone in the chancel for the first Sunday. And the thing we realized very quickly, and it's one of the points I'm going to try to make at least 3 times tonight, is if you're doing anything live online from your church, you need to get Jeff Champeau to come, or someone like Jeff, and check out your internet service in your church, top to bottom. Let me just say, I will say that hopefully at least 2 more times, because that ended up being an impediment for us. That once we got that fixed, everything else got a lot easier. So I'll give Jeff and the folks like him a plug for getting that kind of work checked out, getting that checked out in your church. But so we started off with the iPad. We quickly moved to a couple of cameras with a switcher that we were able to do live. And we have been live in our sanctuary, except for a couple of Sundays throughout the pandemic. It's a very large sanctuary. We're able to spread out. We limited our people to the numbers that were allowed in Oklahoma, which is 186, right, Jeff? I'm kidding. Our restrictions have not been that great. We limited it to 6 people to begin with. We've expanded that up to 10, but we've been live in the sanctuary the whole time. And we did move toward a more permanent system, installing what are called pan tilt zoom cameras that allow for one person to control multiple cameras. We had actually just upgraded our audio system 6-8 months before the pandemic, which was very beneficial. So we were able to really work on the audio quality. We also went with a service called Boxcast for distributing our live worship. to the church website, to Facebook Live, and to YouTube. We did have some audio issues early on that we found out were very, very technical, deep in the weeds, and got those fixed, and that really helped a lot. The other thing the church did is it pivoted toward really creating online experiences beyond worship. The children's ministry shifted to create, truly online, at home usage children's ministry. Youth department did the same thing. The church also started using a mobile and online prayer app, so that people could sign up for that and get looped in, and prayer concerns were taken care of. It really actually much better through the use of the app than it was really before, and it kept people connected in a really strong way. All our classes went online. One thing that we were able to do is we actually partnered with a congregation in Denver to do a class. We did an evening adult class, and because, well, it doesn't matter where you are, we partnered with the congregation in Denver. We had a person, actually an alum of Phillips, who has gotten his doctorate in disability studies, and we partnered with him to do a 8-week class on being truly welcoming in the church for people of different abilities. So I really feel like that the congregation and the staff of the church really came to see some advantages where we were. Now, I'll also say that while there were some staff in the church and some congregants too, who really saw that we really needed to fully develop an online presence in every way, there were others who were really anxious to get back in and make everything normal. And that has been a conflict that continues. And of course, it's challenging because you only have so many hours, and to do both excellently, as anyone who does it knows, it's just very difficult to do both excellently. But so far, I mean, the congregation, everything's been really going pretty well. Online attendance has been really good. We are now having a max of 100 people in our sanctuary on Sunday mornings for one service, because it's a big sanctuary, so they can spread out. We're hitting probably around 60 to 80, depending on the week. And that's also been another challenge, is now we're also having to be attentive to, our tech team got really used to doing whatever we wanted because there was nobody in the sanctuary except the staff. But now we've had to actually change up what we're doing to make sure that we are also serving the people in the pews, which has been a real kind of interesting shift. But it's kind of where we are.
Thanks, Kurt. I want to just highlight one little thing you mentioned in there, and it was about audio. You said that you had some way in the weeds audio issues. I think if there's one, if there's, if you have a budget of $200 and you have to use that $200 to make one change to your system that will benefit folks, forget about image quality and cameras and lenses. Focus on the audio, because if people can't hear, it doesn't matter what it looks like. So
yeah, I always teach one of Kurt's t-shirt maxims is, people will put up with bad video a lot longer than they'll put up with bad audio.
Agreed. Thank you to each of you for giving us your thoughts. We do have quite a few questions rolling in, so I want to turn it over to Sherilyn. She's going to pose some questions, and as she does, we can just do popcorn style. Give us your thoughts on the things that folks want to hear about. Sherilyn?
Okay, the first question that I have here, Brandon, what platform does your associate minister use to edit the worship videos together? Brandon, you are.
I see. Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we use iMovie I recently upgraded my computer. We do switch off occasionally with kind of putting the worship services together, and I went ahead and got Final Cut Pro, which I've only played with a little bit, but quite frankly, iMovie is pretty sufficient for what we need, and I've actually found it kind of fun to play with.
Okay.
Suzanne or Kurt, anything to add to that?
I produce everything. In fact, I'm on contract with the church that once a month for the next 8 months, I'll be producing a worship service for them, with giving all of their staff and musicians a week off. And I only use iMovie, and it is amazing and easy. And I mean, there's all sorts of little gimmicks that you can do in it, but for basic, anything, and there's lots of how-to videos. So I can't say enough about iMovie.
Yeah, and I've used Final Cut Pro since version 1. So I'm a Final Cut Pro person at the church and actually in my office, my video person in the office. They are both Premiere users. Blackmagic Design also has a free, very high level professional editor whose name escapes me at this very moment, of course, because I should have written that down. But if you go to blackmagicdesign.com, you can find it's a very, very powerful editor. There's a learning curve. Again, iMovie is the go-to if you're looking.
Okay.
Somebody just asked, sorry,
Yes.
Sherilyn, somebody just asked, what about Windows-based software? And I'll throw out Adobe Premiere Elements. I've got Premiere Pro, and it's great, but it'll do a lot. Premiere Elements, on the other hand, is like maybe 70 or 80 bucks, and it is much easier. So it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of the capabilities of iMovie. So if you're go ahead, Suzanne.
There's also Camtasia, so it's you can find that online. It can be a little hiccupy, but if you're looking for something and your platforms are different from person to person, Camtasia works great.
Cool, thanks. Go ahead, Sherilyn.
Okay, I have another one here. To Brandon, what does your pre-recorded worship service include? Since it's a half an hour, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So it includes sort of a kind of squished together version of everything that we would do in an hour. There's a standard welcome from me that begins every broadcast, then followed by a prelude. We took the call to worship and opening prayer and kind of made that one thing. There's a children's blessing. It then moves into scripture and the sermon, which I aim for about 6 to 8 minutes on the sermon. There's an anthem followed by a pastoral prayer, then a communion meditation and music during communion, and then a benediction, and then a postlude. So it looks like your kind of standard mainline Protestant worship service. Like I said, just kind of squished together.
Okay.
Sherilyn, I'm gonna jump in with something that this was my spouse's idea, so I can't take credit for it. But even though our service is live, they started a thing called Pastor Talk, which was about anywhere from a 20-minute to 10-minute long chat between two of the pastors, or pastor and a staff person, that airs just before the service starts. They pre-record that. And that's been a real helpful communication tool because, they don't have the time. You're not seeing people in the hall. People don't come by the church, of course. And that's been really helpful. It was also interesting. We had a volunteer who hadn't been there since March, who we needed a couple of weeks ago. And she came in and we were testing the audio for the pastor talk, and she was looking around. I said, "What are you looking for, Linda?" She said, "I'm looking for Pastor Charla." I said, "That's pre-recorded." She thought it was live the whole time. But it's been a really, really helpful tool to communicate, especially in the early days of the pandemic.
Sounds cool. What is the most effective way you've done or offered communion on video only? I assume that means remotely.
I think in the question there, I think I just want to say that I've allowed people to be creative. So we haven't necessarily said, grab your cracker and your cup of juice. I mean, every once in a while, I was like, hey, if you had tacos last night and you have some left over, let's get that and some salsa. And we've tried to be, I mean, a little campy. We're in Texas, that sells. But I think encouraging people to use what is near them and around them, much like Jesus did as he's walking and teaching, has been a way where we said Jesus did this often at table. There was a wide variety of foods. And so you get what you have. And I know that we've had people post pictures of them having leftover birthday cake and milk, and encouraging people to send us a picture to our church and let us know how they're engaging with communion. And that's been a way for people to giggle and laugh, but also be at table with one another. I will say early on, and we've continued this, we've done fellowship dinners via Zoom, where we are at table and have an agape feast where everyone just has the food that they have and we chit chat and share at Zoom. It is so much fun, but we do have a moment where we bless the elements on the table and bless them to our bodies, much like you do at communion. And we share a cup and everyone holds up whatever they're drinking, whether it be a juice box or a wine glass, it doesn't matter. And we just kind of create that holy space. And so we've kind of carried that through when we've just done options for virtual communion.
So one of the pieces that I haven't mentioned is that there's a little bit of unpaid labor that helps make all of this happen. And my wife has a real good eye for aesthetics, and so one of the beautiful things about doing this from our home is that we're able to, kind of like Suzanne says, lean into, okay, whatever we're going to experiment with, whatever we're going to be creative with, what would be really interesting visually. And so we've played with that a good bit. I think we have for a long time, again, at First Christian, used a Jan Richardson blessing for communion as a litany. And so I incorporate that every week when I do communion, as well as the words of institution, with something interesting visually. So I probably the one that, is most, I think most outside of the box for us is I did, just kind of an above slow-mo of communion being prepared. So, almost like you would see on a YouTube food video where the bread is being broken and then the wine is being poured. You get that kind of visual from above shot. And so just, again, kind of, playing with that. And we have done a couple of times communion delivery to our folks with a home litany that people can use. And for a number of years now, we've used that, sticky Hawaiian bread for communion for intinction. And so we got a bunch of Costco had a sale, so we were really happy. We got a bunch of those Hawaiian rolls and delivered one of those in a juice box to folks along with the litany. And then one of our elders donated a number of those chalice shaped prepackaged communion element sets. So they're tiny. They look like a chalice. On the bottom, you peel off, and there's a cracker, and then you can open it up for the grape juice. They're actually designed in order to help folks who have carpal tunnel open them more easily, but they look just like a chalice, and so people really, really appreciated that as something tactile while we're not able to join together for worship.
Wow, we're getting some great questions and we're almost at the halfway point. So the next question that we have typed in the Q&A, could you expand a little more on sermon prep for a mini documentary? I personally struggle with preaching to a camera and not to people. One of y'all want to take that on?
So I think that was some of the language that I used. So I'll just briefly say that. So when I'm in a sanctuary, I'm a manuscriptless preacher. So I kind of have everything kind of embodied or memorized or however you want to describe it. And so in the moment, if I lose my place, I'm able to kind of redirect myself in what I'm saying. When you're shooting for a camera, you have to cut. You can't really redirect in the moment. Instead, it makes more sense to just stop and do another take. And so that was one of the signals for me that I needed to kind of change how I was preaching, because I was having the same sort of trouble with that. And so I did a little research and purchased an app for my iPad that's a teleprompter for one. And then, kind of as I said, kind of started thinking about how to put sermons together a little bit differently. So I began kind of thinking of them as frames, almost like a television teleplay. So here's what happens in the first frame. Here's what happens in the second. Here's what happens in the third, and here's what happens in the fourth. And some of those, as I kind of thought them out, would be me talking to the camera with the aid of the teleprompter to have my script. Others would have a photo I took, or a picture of something, or my congregation is probably now very, very tired of seeing Marc Chagall. And so, just all of those sort of things that help kind of visualize and bring the point home, rather than just a picture of me talking. And so there's a little bit, because it's also, a different sort of visual media than watching someone deliver a sermon. It I think helps kind of keep people's attention a little bit better. And again, it's also thinking about kind of time and attention span a little bit differently as well. Whereas, your typical sermon might, depending on your congregation, might be 12 to 20 minutes. I've been trying to think about this in kind of the 6 to no more than 12 a minute range for that. And just again, kind of last thing I'll say, I've been watching the YouTube analytics, and the average kind of attention that we're able to retain is around 12 minutes over the course of a 30-minute video, which just tells me that maybe I need to really just preach for about 3. So.
Okay, that's hard for a preacher to say, I'm sure. We're starting to get some more tech questions, and I noticed some great conversation going on over in the chat on tech. This first one is, what's the best solution for maintaining a good internet connection speed? We have good Wi-Fi in the church, but it drops too much to maintain the streaming that I'd like. Same issue occurs when I connect via my AT&T Unlimited cell service on my iPhone 11 as a hotspot. It still drops, but not as much. That sounds like a Jeff question.
Oh, yeah, I'll take this one on. So, everybody knows what this is. Most network cables are blue. Mine happens to be horned frog purple. But wireless isn't good for when you're passing lots of data, like a video feed. Wireless isn't what you want. You want to plug in. So no wireless network. Even if you design and build the absolute perfect wireless network, the second somebody walks by the sidewalk outside with their cell phone on hotspot mode and is transmitting on the same channel you're transmitting on, they're going to generate interference. And all over the world, wireless channels are unlicensed, which means they get to generate interference. So for that and a bunch of other reasons, stay away from wireless if at all possible. Go ahead and run the wires, whether it's microphone cables or network. Everything you can hardwire is just going to be, when you send one packet down a wire, it's going to make it nearly 100% of the time to the other end. When you send a packet over the air, 30, 50, 80% of the time, it's not going to make it, and you'll have to retransmit, and that's those drops you're talking about. So, so that's the best. And at my church in Norman, it's a nearly 100-year-old sanctuary. So we can't just, pop a ceiling tile and run cable. Sometimes we have to get real creative and drill through concrete and stuff. But we've chosen to do that because it's worth it. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and the other thing is, even if you have those networks, it's good to have your worship tech network, to have one of those and have that isolated and have it have priority in your system so it gets the most bandwidth, it gets the most data usage. You wanted that to go first. The other thing is 2 Sundays in a row. I kid you not. 2 Sundays in a row, we had squirrels chew through internet cable and turn off the internet in part of our building. 2 Sundays in a row.
Even
sometimes
the
stuff just
hardwire.
happens.
Yep.
Even the hard wire.
Okay, the next question, I'm going to kind of try to do a short version. The church just got a camera, laptop, audio interface, video capture card, trying to get to a permanent streaming setup. Better than their iPhone on a stand streaming to Facebook Live. Yay. As far as actually pushing the finished AV out to Facebook, YouTube, etc., do you recommend a software like Boxcast or Restream or something else I don't know about, or a hardware device? I'm hearing talk about switchers and I don't understand them.
We use, at First Christian Norman, we use a switcher, just like Kurt mentioned earlier. We've got 3 cameras. They feed into a PC, and then from that PC, we send our video out to Restream, and then Restream sends it to YouTube and Facebook. We've had great success doing that. We did the iPhone rubber banded to a music stand the very first Sunday, and then after that, we cobbled together. We actually started out with 3 borrowed camcorders and the one video switcher that was still in stock by that point. We ordered and got it overnighted, but have since upgraded to some better cameras. But Restream has been great for us. Kurt, how's Boxcast for you?
Yeah, Boxcast has been really good. It was kind of, we had the kind of, I think Jeff, you and I were competing for the same switcher, it sounds like. So we were trying to get something fast that we knew would work, that we didn't have to spend a lot of time on the back end. And one reason we went with Boxcast, there are plenty of other options. But it's been really, really good, very stable, very easy to use, decent customer support, which is nice. And basically it's a small, it's probably about a 6x4 box that plugs into the network, and then we send our HDMI video signal out of our switcher and our audio out of our board, actually out of the switcher too, into the Boxcast, and then it sends the stream out to YouTube, our website, and Facebook Live right now. There also Resi is another good service. And I was going to say, if any of you are ProPresenter users, ProPresenter 7 just recently added Resi support internally to ProPresenter 7. So that's a little higher end kind of thing, but that's an option now too.
I didn't realize Boxcast was a piece of hardware. Restream is a service. It's not, there's nothing physical to it. And by the way, this kind of discussion that we're having right here is exactly what the tech core is going to focus on. For everyone with these kinds of questions, there will be some instructions at the end where you can express your interest in being part of an ongoing dialogue about this kind of really technical stuff. These are great questions, but if this is where you geek out like me, be sure to give us your contact info at the end. And there's even a great dialogue in the chat with people with questions and offering solutions. This is exactly what we had in mind.
But here's a question that I think really does need to be addressed. Copyrights. Can one of you, I see you, Suzanne, getting your notes out. Because as many of you know, copyright is a big deal with both music and with excerpts out of written works. So Suzanne, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. And anybody jump in over me. But I've done extensive work in this. I've had to deal with this for many, many years. And I will tell you right now that 95% of our churches are in copyright violation. So even if you think that you're not, you probably are. So let me quickly, and if you need more specific information, if you will reach out to me, I'd be glad to resource you and help you. Things are changing quickly. A lot of the grace period is no longer being extended to churches. So please understand that you do need a license for music, even if you're playing music, not just singing music. And so the standards are CCLI and one license. Most of the traditional hymns you'll find in one license. Most of them were contemporary modern music you will find in CCLI. What you will also need is an actual streaming license. So there are different levels of licenses. You have a print license, which allows you to do lyrics on a screen, put information in your bulletin. But if you are streaming in any form or fashion, including pre-recording and distributing it later, you also have to have a streaming license. So there are several different packages. Their staff is super helpful. And if you use a variety of music from modern to hymns, you have to have both of those licenses from CCLI and one license. And then you also have to have a streaming license on top of that. You also need permission to post pre-recorded worship if it contains music of any kind, including a podcast and streaming license above and beyond, which would then allow you to post to YouTube, Facebook, Zoom, IGTV, other internet-based platforms. CVLI is actually the license that allows you to show movie clips that are only contained with certain rights. So you can't just randomly show something. So that's another level of license. That's a good question, Steve. You need to do thorough research for copyright clause bonuses. And this is the way that this works. So there are certain activities that are not permitted no matter what your license is. Just because you have a license doesn't mean that you can go do what you want. So remember, a streaming license allows you to digitally transmit copyrighted music, but only CCLI and one license based music, which means if you're using a version of a song because it's meaningful and it's underneath, I'm not even talking about singing, and it was like from a movie score, let's say there's all this wonderful John Williams music out there, you have to go to the copyright holder for John Williams music. That is not covered under CCLI and one license. This is where churches get in a lot of trouble. So that's where the streaming licenses and CCLI and one license do not cover streaming artist or record label recordings and songs. That's different. It may give permission, let's say, for your band or your choir to perform a song, let's say, but you also then have to, besides that, get the permission to then digitally stream that out. So for example, your band could do 10,000 Reasons by Matt Redman, right? Because you bought the music and you have this, but then you can't play an original recording by Matt Redman. Okay, does that make sense? Otherwise, you should call Matt Redman, and you always need to have written permission. It could be an email, it cannot be a text message, or it can be a printed letter to have yourself covered. And I will say, most copyright owners are pretty nice. It does take a little bit of legwork. I know I recently contacted an artist and they asked me for $10 and to just make sure that I put the information in the comments below. They were so glad to be asked. So also, I'll see a lot of churches showing YouTube videos in worships that they've seen that's out on YouTube, and there's software that you can rip a YouTube video down. I will say it gets really hard because YouTube videos doesn't mean that people actually followed copyright permission, but that doesn't allow you to get grace period. Okay, so be sure if you're doing that you've got the description and the link in the comments. And be sure it says this is intended for use in worship, and be sure you've at least tried to contact the publisher before showing it, and that might get you out of Facebook jail or YouTube jail, because they will shut down your page and they won't tell you ahead of time. They will just shut you down. So what I say is be safe, not sorry, and always do due diligence. I see Jamie asked about how expensive a license is. It depends on the size of your congregation and your needs. So there, if you go online to onelicense.net or CCLI, they have charts, and they will show you based on your congregation size and what you're doing, what you actually need, and then they can do packages together for you.
Wow. I think that was probably a very useful thing. Partly because the next question was the challenge of singing due to audio sync. They have some pre-recorded accompaniment for hymns and songs, and everyone's muted while singing at home. Wondering if there's any way that you've come up with to have any kind of a choir or singing together.
No. I mean,
There you go.
not live with a bunch of different people. I mean, even a small group, 4 people trying to sing happy birthday it just doesn't work. The way to do it, and you've seen this, is to have the individual people record their stuff, then you edit it all together, and it can be lovely. And we've done that, but I have yet to find any reliable way for a live group to sing it together.
The problem is all of the services like Zoom here that we're using, they duck audio, which means they lower the volume of people that they don't think are in focus. And so even if you're trying to sing together, it's going to pick and choose, and you're going to hear one person and not hear the others. So it's just designed not to do that specifically.
Yeah, I can offer some workarounds, and that would be, no, I mean, just hear me out. I suggest that you find, this is a good opportunity for you to highlight other people. So it could be that you contact a family that you know sings well and ask them to do some things. I know, to supplement what we've done, I hired some musician friends of mine that are quarantining in bubble together, that are artists, and we hired them for a month and they did several pieces of music for us. So there are ways to do that. And you could contact different people. I know all artists, including myself, are struggling right now because all of our gigs have been canceled. So people are looking, and we paid $25 a song. So I'm not saying that this is, that for some churches that is difficult. I recognize that, but it was $25 to have a group of 4 people produce, record, and put the lyrics on videos and send them to me. So there are ways to do that. You're just going to have to get creative. And if you need some help with that, shout at me. I'd love to resource you.
The next question is the best video camera that's not an iPhone. Thoughts?
Well, this is one of those, as I always say, you can spend as much money as you would like, because the term best isn't necessarily helpful. It depends on what you're doing and what you need. For example, most streams right now, what's called 1080p, which is the high definition 1080 resolution. That's really about the highest you will need in a typical worship setting right now. Now, if you want to future proof and you want to go up a notch, something that does 4K UHD is good. But I can also tell you that editing those things, because we just got 3 of those cameras at work. You got to have a really, really, really good computer and a ton of storage. So I would get something that features, a couple of things. One is, if you're working with volunteers, always keep in mind how complicated is the camera to run to get what you need. That's really, really something a lot of people forget. And your local, computer store, equipment store, they're not going to know about that. So you need to find whatever gear you get. It needs to be something that works for the volunteers, the people you have running it. And again, a 1080p, a camera, I would go with the name brand that has what we call good glass, good lenses. Canon, JVC, Panasonic are kind of the ones. You can also use DSLRs. A lot of people are using your digital cameras for this kind of work. They have some good points and some not so good points. Sometimes you have to have a separate lens. They can be a little more complicated to use. But that really, there is no single answer to that question, unfortunately. But if you want to run stuff by me, contact me. I'd be happy to talk cameras with you.
One thing to look for if you are looking for a camera at any price point, if you're going to stream, take the make and the model number and Google it. Put in the name, the make and the model, and then clean HDMI. You want a camera that will output a clean HDMI. That means it'll output an image to your software or your computer or your streaming box without all the information on the screen, that when you look through the little viewfinder on the camera, you see how many minutes of tape is remaining and what your battery status is and what your focus is. You want to be able to turn all that stuff off so that your people at home don't see all your video camera stats. That's known as clean HDMI. So make sure whatever camera you buy will output clean HDMI, and you don't have to spend much money for that. When we first started, we used some borrowed, $250, $300 camcorders, and they were all provided clean HDMI. So something to watch for.
Okay, well, I want to honor our time here. We've got 6 minutes and 13 questions. So let's go ahead and it looks, I wonder if maybe we could answer this one. How have you balanced the desire to see the sanctuary, to return to the sanctuary, with the need to manage, restrict, and prohibit access? I've been concerned about congregants getting confused about whether we're actually live or pre-recorded.
I'll throw out, First Christian Norman decided in the very beginning that we were going to only do live. We don't do, well, we've done a couple of pre-recorded things, but it wasn't Sunday morning worship. And this is where that question about whichever way works best for you, figure it out. But what we decided was that just out of a sense of, and we have feedback that from congregants saying the one constant, the one thing that's resembles normalcy is on Sunday morning, church is happening in our sanctuary, and it's right as they see it. So that was a decision we made, and with respect to people coming, only much more recently have we opened it up for folks to come in. So that was the decision we made.
Thank you. It looks like there are some other technical questions down here, as well as a volunteer. Yay. Panelists, if you would be so kind as a couple of you have said, contact me. Could you put your preferred email over in the chat for people? And yes, we recorded this. And yes, I'm going to try to write some sort of a summary of some of these programs and packages that we've talked about so that we can post it along with the recording to make this the most useful. It'll go on disciples.org somewhere, probably a post as a recap of our event here. So Terry, would you like to jump back in and we will capture all of this chat and stuff and go forth.
Great. Thanks so much, Sherilyn. And thanks to all of you. This is exactly what we hoped would happen. We knew that so many of you still had lots of questions, but we also hoped that this might serve as sort of a kicking off point for those of you who not only have the questions, but like sharing all the technical and creative information with one another. So if you would put your email, if you haven't already, put it into the chat. The panelists will do that, and Sherilyn will, in her summary, be sure that information gets out to you. But be looking on our website and social media for an invitation to become part of the Tech Core. We'll probably set up some sort of online form so that you can share with us not only your contact information, but what your particular skill sets are, your interests. We really do want to try to organize this group of people so that you can bless the church. Somebody said to me, I don't teach Sunday school and I don't work with kids, but hey, I can help you get your online worship or whatever it is going well. And we've been hearing from a lot of technical and creative professionals who simply want to serve the church this way. And I think now more than ever before, we need you. If you have those gifts and those abilities and you want to work alongside pastors. I saw a comment from a pastor who was like, oh my gosh, how do I do all of this and still be pastor? And how can I create some sort of good case for having a paid position to do this? I'm also really interested in there are people who, this is what you do for a living, but I'm also really interested in those of you who would be interested in volunteering, just to drop in and consult and help a congregation or help a general ministry. Jeff, for example, has been very gracious in helping us with various webinars, just kind of behind the scenes. And we would have had to pay, I won't tell you how much money one group charged us to do what we found out was a simple thing called just streaming from Zoom to Facebook. We totally got gouged. And while the service was gifted to us, I was like, oh God, we have to do something else. So really looking for those of you who would be willing to share your gifts, as well as creating a pool of people, those of you who are professionals, who churches, Suzanne has a contract with the church. There are others of you who do that kind of work, and it's your ministry. And we certainly want to be able to create a platform for people who need your services to connect to you. And for those of you who simply want to serve and are able to do that on some kind of part-time or even volunteer basis, to do that too. But thanks so much for all of your information. The recording of this will be posted, as Sherilyn said, on our website, and we'll probably also put the link on social media so it's accessible to even more people. But Jeff and Suzanne, Brandon and Kurt, thank you so much for all of your help in making this happen tonight. And for all of you, we had over 80 people who were logged on tonight, but 88 in total. So this is certainly something that we'll be doing more of. And this is the new world. I can't imagine any congregation, even after we're able to be maskless, right? I can't imagine an environment where you won't need to still have some kind of online presence in order to continue to reach the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're just in new times, and that new world, boy, it landed right in our laps. And thanks be to God for all of you who are working so hard. So as we begin this Advent season, may you find hope and joy and peace and love and all of those things that are so important as we are in this season of anticipation, the new world that comes because Jesus is here. So God bless you all. And we look forward to being in touch with you. And again, thanks so much to our panelists. I do want to lift one of our staff members in prayer who has been ill, Brenda Rossi, who is our director of meetings and was instrumental in kind of getting all of this set up. And so Sherilyn and others who jumped in to help her, just say a prayer for Brenda.
Yes,
that she'll get better and be better soon. So God bless you all and good night.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.